So if you find that your deodorant's not working, that's the first thing I would recommend, is that making sure that there's an antiperspirant component to it. So I use the Dove antiperspirant spray. On days I don't feel like I need an antiperspirant, like if I'm not really going to be sweating, I really like the Drunk Elephant. It's in a normal kind of dispenser, but it's a cream, it's a lotion. Welcome back to another episode of #Skinthusiast the podcast. This is going to be another solo Q&A. You guys have been loving these. And as you may or may not know, over on my Instagram, every Sunday I collect all your questions to answer either that day or sometime throughout the week while I'm doing my 10-minute treatment. But 10 minutes is only so long, and hundreds of questions come in for these Q&As, so I can only get to a very small fraction of them. So I started doing these monthly Q&As where I like to answer all the overflow, especially the ones that come in most commonly. So definitely head over to my stories every Sunday and submit your questions if you'd like to hear them answered here on the podcast. So the first one on today's docket is my favorite deodorant to use. I'm sensitive to so many. So I actually did a post about this that went super viral on TikTok because I see this so commonly, these armpit rashes that are secondary to irritating ingredients in a lot of quote unquote natural deodorants. So a lot of these deodorants will use ingredients like sodium bicarbonate, which is also known as baking soda, and it can be really irritating on the skin. This might happen after years. So a lot of times people will say, well, like, I used native deodorant for 3 years and it never caused an issue, so I didn't attribute it to that. So you can develop an allergy or an irritation to an ingredient over time at any time. So the more and more that your skin is exposed to ingredients, especially ones that are known to be irritating, the more likely you are to develop an allergy or an irritation to it later on. So sodium bicarbonate is not the only ingredient that I see this happen with, but it's one of the most common, and it's in almost all of the natural deodorants. So this can cause a lot of irritation, rashes, etc. So my personal deodorant favorites are, for antiperspirant, I like the Dove spray, the antiperspirant spray. There is a difference between antiperspirant and deodorant. So antiperspirant actually keeps you from sweating. And then deodorants are just basically like fragrances and other ingredients to help to deodorize the underarms. So if you are someone who is sweating, but you're only using a deodorant, they might not be working because the sweat is contributing to the body odor. The bacteria in the sweat is contributing to the body odor. So if you find that your deodorant's not working, that's the first thing I would recommend, is that making sure that there's an antiperspirant component to it. So I use the Dove antiperspirant spray. On days I don't feel like I need an antiperspirant, like if I'm not really going to be sweating, I really like the Drunk Elephant deodorant. It's actually it's in a normal kind of dispenser, but it's a cream, it's a lotion, and it has some nice, really gently exfoliating ingredients, so it helps just really smooth out the underarms. It's going to be good for anyone who has a little bit of hyperpigmentation. There is arrowroot powder in here, which can be irritating for some. So for me, it's not an issue, but just something to keep in mind if you notice that you're sensitive to arrowroot powder. It might not be the best one for you. Next question. What is my shampoo recommendation for oily hair? So this is going to be very similar to the way in which I recommend cleansers for your skin. You have to think of your scalp and your hair as two different entities. So your hair, for instance, I would say most people on the strands need something that is conditioning, right? Because our hair is dead. It's been there for quite a while. Even if you don't do any services, you still naturally have hair damage because even UV exposure, brushing your hair, all those things damage your hair over time. So we keep conditioning agents to the end of the hair, and then on the scalp is where we keep our cleansing agents. If you have oily hair, your best bet is to look for shampoos that come out of the bottle clear. And that's because those aren't going to have those extra lipids that are going to deposit on the scalp, meant more for dry skin types. So anything that comes out clear is often going to be really helpful for oily skin. But I also really enjoy the K18 detox shampoo, especially if you're an in-between. Maybe you're not super oily, but you're not super dry. That's a great option. It comes out like a charcoal black color. For oily hair, I really like the way their detox shampoo is great. BB Bumble and Bumble's Sunday shampoo is going to be really effective at removing dirt and oil. Very highly efficacious scalp cleanse with that one. So those are great options if you're someone with oily scalp. They're also great options for somebody who uses a lot of product at the root and they need to reduce product buildup once a month or twice a month. So those are going to be my options for oily scalp or hair buildup. Next question. What is my best zit stick? Glossier is discontinued and it was my holy grail. So my favorite zit stickers are the ones from Differin. And I'm going to tell you why. You will know that I am not a fan of pimple patches with active ingredients and micro darts. I did a video on this too because I have had so many patients come in with irritation and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation after using these products. And the reason is because zit stickers, pimple patches, by nature are occlusive, right? They're a sticker that are sitting on the top of the skin, so they're going to occlude whatever is underneath them. So when you combine those with active ingredients, that can be helpful. But then when you also combine them with micro darts, it is just further increasing the irritation potential, which is often what I see. So I avoid pimple patches specifically with micro darts. I use micro darts elsewhere on the face, but not on already inflamed skin. So I really like the ones with different because they do have a little salicylic acid and they have that occlusive nature of the patch, which is helpful, but no micro darts. So that is my go-to for pimple patches. I'll definitely link all of these below, any specific product recs that I have for you guys. Next question. Best thing to do for skin as we go into the fall. So as we go into the fall and the temperatures start to drop and humidity starts to drop, we have to potentially start adjusting our cleansers and moisturizers. So for cleansers, that might be looking for something a little bit more creamy, a little bit more gentle. I really like the Skin Fix Ectoin and Ceramide cleanser. I, of course, love the Cetaphil Gentle Cleanser. That's like a go-to staple and very affordable. So you might have to kind of ditch your gel cleansers that you were using in the summer months when you were maybe a little bit more oily or, you're sweating more. So we might have to adjust those cleansers. Next, we might have to adjust our moisturizers to something a little bit more quote-unquote heavy. I love something with ceramides because that really helps to protect and support the skin barrier. So something like the Alpen Beauty Ghost Berry with ceramides. I love the Skin Fix moisturizer with ceramides. I love the Xeraphyte moisturizer with ceramides. So those are going to be really nice options as we move into the fall. As far as your actives, as long as you're very intentional about your cleansers and moisturizers, you should hopefully still be able to use the same active routine, the same vitamin C, the same retinoid. You might find that you want to switch your retinoid to on top of your moisturizer instead of underneath if your skin is feeling dry. And then of course your sunscreen. You want to continue using your sunscreen, but maybe instead of the light mattifying sunscreen you were using in the summer months, you might switch to something a little bit more moisturizing. I really like Elta MD Restore. It's nice and moisturizing. I really like the one from Naturium. Their sunscreen is like a moisturizer in itself, so that's going to be a great option. So just making those small tweaks as you enter into fall. And then for people who like to do in-office procedures like lasers and microneedling, a lot of times, especially in places elsewhere in the country, unlike Miami where it's hot all year, but other places who do truly have seasons, your provider might recommend waiting until the fall to do some of these procedures where you're not going to be in the sun as much, because we know that sun can really impede healing and can even make matters worse if you're not using proper sun protection. And the heat too, it is hard to heal from a laser, a little bit more uncomfortable to heal from microneedling when it's hot and humid out. So you might find that your provider is recommending you wait till the fall months to do some of these procedures. So don't be alarmed if you hear that recommendation. That's very common in the industry for us to wait until fall to do some of these in-clinic procedures. Next question, best in-clinic treatment for rosacea. So my favorite way to treat redness associated with rosacea is the V-Beam Perfecta. It's a vascular laser that specifically targets redness and red blood cells, your broken blood vessels, etc., in the skin. And that is a really effective way to help treat the redness. Now, for just diffuse redness, you'll usually need a few treatments every year. You'll do a series every year to really get the best benefit. And what I always tell my patients is that in between treatments, you want to do your best to reduce flushing. So that might be a topical medication like Rhofade to reduce flushing. That might be avoiding your triggers in between treatments to reduce flushing. And the reason this is important is because as your blood vessels dilate more and more, they start to lose their compliance or their ability to shrink back up. So if you're regularly flushing between treatments, it can hinder the results that you might be able to get. Next question, what do I do for brow care / growth? So for brow care, I just use my regular moisturizer on my brow hairs for the conditioning agents. You can also use your hair conditioner in the shower on your brows and rinse it off. For brow growth, you can use lash serums. Lash serums with prostaglandin analogs are effective at growing lashes and growing brows. However, you'll know if you follow me on Instagram, I'm not personally a fan of these because there are side effects that come with prostaglandin analogs, such as irritation, changing of the iris color, and fat loss around the eye. So it's personally not worth the risk for me. But if you weigh those options and you believe that the risk is worth it for you, those options are effective. Next question, should you LED every day? So this will depend on the mask that you're using. Each mask is going to have different instructions that it's important to follow, because the time that you use it every day and how often you use it throughout the week is kind of determined by the amount of bulbs and the irradiance of the mask. So I always recommend following the instructions on that specific mask. For me, I use mine, I would say 5 days a week. And the next question that ties into this well is how to use a new face together. So new face I use in the morning. I cleanse my skin because you don't want any oil to impede the conduction of the device. Then I'll do my new face, and then I'll rinse off the gel or cream, whichever new face activator I'm using, and then I'll go in with the rest of my routine. You don't have to rinse off the cream, but my skin is pretty sensitive and I find that it does better when I do rinse it. Then at night, you would use your LED. So you would cleanse, then do your LED, and then go on with the rest of your routine. This episode is brought to you by, well, me. Skinthusiast.com is your one-stop shop for all things skin, hair, and beauty. I have countless blog posts to educate you on all the skin concerns and most common skin questions I receive. We also have a complete skincare basics guide on our shop page, as well as the cutest In My Skin era crew necks. If you want to support the show, please head over to skinthusiast.com/shop, and don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Next question, heatless curl tools. I love using heatless curls. You'll know I never use a curling iron anymore, like maybe once or twice a year for a special event, but I pretty much blow my hair out after every single wash with the Dyson Airwrap, and that gives me like the really nice 90s bouncy blowout, and then I just sleep with it up in a twist with the clip very loosely, and that keeps the style. If I want more defined curls, I'll use heatless curls. So the one I use is from Kitsch. I'll link it below, and I'll just gently mist my hair so that it's just a tiny bit damp, and then I'll wrap the curls up in the heatless curl tool. I love that the tools are satin or silk, so they don't cause friction on the hair, and then I'll usually wrap my hair either in a silk bonnet or just make sure I sleep on my silk pillowcase to reduce friction, and I get really nice natural curls. They do fall throughout the day, but they still look really beautiful and natural and nice. Next question, is retinoid different during pregnancy, during breastfeeding? Because we know we don't use retinoids during pregnancy, but during breastfeeding, different providers have different opinions here. For me, the data says that the absorption topically of retinoids is very low, so it shouldn't be a concern in excretion in breast milk. So I personally am comfortable using retinoids in breastfeeding. I do it for myself. I have this conversation with my patients as well. So something to have a conversation with your provider about, but all in all, the data points to yes, it is safe. What do I think about powder sunscreens that influencers are raving about? So powder sunscreens are really good for one thing and one thing only, and that's just mattifying the skin like any powder. This is how I use them in my routine. If I need to mattify my skin, I always reach for an SPF powder, because what's the harm of a little extra SPF? It might help. It definitely won't hurt, might help, but the reality is it's not giving you adequate coverage. So it certainly shouldn't be your first application, and it really shouldn't be your reapplication either. The safest and most effective way to reapply your sunscreen is to use a lotion and just apply it with a beauty blender or your hands right over your makeup. It's not ideal, but it is going to give you the best coverage. Next, what are my thoughts on microdermabrasion and microneedling? Microdermabrasion I'm not a huge fan of, just because of the abrasive nature of it. Microneedling I love. I think it's a great option. I use it often in my patients. 3 to 4 treatments of microneedling can increase collagen production by 400%, which is a huge number for something as minimally invasive as microneedling. So when you come in, at least in our office, we'll numb your full face, we take your blood, we spin it down, we take out the PRP, and then we microneedle that PRP onto your skin with a little device that has tiny little needles that creates microchannels in the skin and helps that PRP to absorb deeper into the skin. Now, you'll leave there with a little bit of dried blood on your face, because the endpoint of this procedure is pinpoint bleeding. So when we reach pinpoint bleeding, which means there's a tiny little bit of blood on your skin, that means that we're at the depth that we want. And then the next day you'll wash your face like normal, and you might look like you have a mild sunburn for a couple of days. Now, your downtime is going to vary greatly on how aggressive your provider went, but in general, you don't need to be too aggressive with microneedling. Again, that pinpoint bleeding is the end goal that we're looking for. So you really can stop on that area once you see the pinpoint bleeding and move on. And when you do it this way, the downtime is pretty minimal. Next question, what drugstore shampoo and conditioner would you recommend? So one of my favorite brands for drugstore hair products is a brand called Kristen S. You guys may or may not have heard of it, but it's available at Target for sure, and maybe Ulta, I'm not sure. But it is my favorite shampoo and conditioner that I can get at Target. And and they have other really great hair products too. I use the pink version, but there is a version for basically every hair type. Next question, what serums are you supposed to use when gua shaing? This is a really common misconception, and I think it's a big roadblock for people who want to gua sha or even facial massage, and that's they get kind of hung up on what product to use underneath, what oil to use underneath. And especially those who are acne prone, who are afraid of using oils, they feel like they can't do facial massage or gua sha because they can't use oil or don't want to use oil. And what I will say is you can gua sha and facial massage with any product used on your face. All that matters is that you have decent slip underneath your fingers or underneath the tool so you're not tugging on your skin. So I'll sometimes do my facial massage while I'm cleansing my skin. I'll sometimes do gua sha right after my normal serum or my normal moisturizer. So as long as you have a little bit of slip on the skin, that's what's important. You don't necessarily need to go and buy a new product for this process. Next question. Hyaluronic acid, niacinamide, vitamin C, retinol, morning, night order. So this is a common question I get. How do I use all these ingredients in my routine? And the answer is you probably don't have to. The reason is, this is why I don't like shopping by ingredients. So this sounds like this person has gone out and purchased a hyaluronic acid serum, a niacinamide serum, a vitamin C serum, and a retinoid product. So vitamin C and retinoid are going to be key, of course. Your vitamin C you're going to use in the morning after cleansing, and your retinoid you're going to use at night, either after cleansing or after your moisturizer, depending on how sensitive your skin is. Hyaluronic acid is in everything. If you look at your vitamin C serum, if you look at your moisturizer, it's likely already there. You don't need a separate serum for it. And the same goes for niacinamide. Check your moisturizer, check your sunscreen. It's probably already in one of those serums. It might even be in your vitamin C serum, depending on the formulation. So you don't necessarily need these extra ingredients in your skincare routine. And this is where I feel like people really end up with more issues, because you're overusing ingredients because they're already in everything else that you're using, and you're really getting hung up on the order, and this can cause a lot of issues. So my recommendation, ditch the A serum, ditch the niacinamide serum. It's probably already in something else you're using, specifically hyaluronic acid. Like, there's definitely hyaluronic acid or glycerin in something else you're using. Hands down, I would guarantee it. Glycerin is just as effective, even more than hyaluronic acid. So you don't need the hyaluronic acid serum. Niacinamide, my recommendation would be, if it's not already in your moisturizer or your sunscreen, look for, when you go to refill your moisturizer or your sunscreen, look for one that has niacinamide in it. You don't need another serum. Okay, next question. Supplements and vitamins, please. Okay. I should do a whole episode on my supplements and vitamins routine. I am someone who employs these types of things in my routine, but they're not for everybody. I want to disclaim that you should absolutely be speaking with your provider before you're starting any of these supplements, because supplements aren't without risk. We think that just because they're not medications, that they can't cause any issues or they can't interfere with any other medications or supplements we're using, and that's simply not true. You really have to weigh what actually works for you based on your goals, based on even blood work, and talking to your provider. But I will tell you what I personally do. So at times when my hair is experiencing thinning, which has been on and off throughout my life, I will use Nutrafol. It is hands down my favorite, really recommendation in general for hair thinning. It's effective, it's clinically proven. You need 3 to 6 months before you're going to start to see results. So consistency is key. It's so important. They have a men's version, of a women's version. They have a version that's vegan without biotin. They have a version for postmenopausal women, and then they also have a version for breastfeeding moms that was formulated with an OBGYN. So after I was pregnant, I switched to the breastfeeding version. Before I was pregnant, I was on the regular. Then obviously during pregnancy, I didn't take it. After I gave birth, I switched to the postpartum version. Then as soon as I was done breastfeeding, I switched back to the women's formulation. I do have a code or a link that gets you $50 off your 3-month supply or $106 off your 6-month supply. So I'll leave that below. This is one treatment that I recommend for a lot of my patients in clinic. Again, check with your provider before you start anything. I do take a prenatal. So the prenatal that I take is from Binto. I like them because they're fully customizable. So in addition to the essential prenatal that I take from them, there's a few other things that are in there based on my lab work that I sent to them. So I had a consultation with one of the nurses on staff there, and she basically went over my blood work and helped me pick exactly what was going in my pack. I've used Binto for probably 4 or 5 years now. So mine has a vitamin D, it has my prenatal, it has a CoQ10, it has a fish oil, an omega-3 fish oil. So again, really a great option. You don't have to necessarily have blood work for them to recommend a prenatal for you or a vitamin in general, but I went back to them when I did have blood work and we changed mine around. And if you're interested, I did my blood work through Poplin. It's getpoplin.com. And basically I did a full panel. This was like a year ago when my husband and I like really first started about thinking to get pregnant in the next few years with our second baby. I wanted to see, he actually got the panel too. So we did this full panel. It was the most comprehensive blood work I've ever had. It was so helpful. It gave me so much insight. So that's what I used for my blood work. And that's available to anybody. You don't need a prescription. You just have a call with their staff, and they go over your results with you. If there's anything concerning, they tell you what to ask your provider about. Next is I do use a protein powder. So I use the Ritual protein powder. It's their prenatal protein powder. I've used it for like 4 years now. It has choline in it. That is my favorite protein powder. And then I also just recently started testing their Hyaluronic, which is actually an anti-wrinkle prevention supplement that came highly requested from all of you. So I will definitely check in once I've been using that for a couple of months and let you know what I think. So I think that's about all the questions we have time for today. As I mentioned, every Sunday I take all of your questions on my Instagram. So if you want to hear your question answered here on the podcast or see it answered on my Instagram, definitely leave it in my Q&A box. And as always, if you appreciated this episode, please share it with your community on Instagram, tag me in your stories, and I will pick a few people to send a little box of Skin Enthusiast goodies to. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next week, Skin Enthusiasts.